Hey there nation, and welcome to the show. We help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to Cheap Shots, the ultimate series for miniature wargamers who want stunning tabletop quality miniatures without breaking the bank. And on this series, we'll show you how to save money on your miniatures painting hobby by using affordable craft paints, budget-friendly tools, and clever techniques. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned hobbyist, you'll learn how to achieve incredible results without the premium price tag. You don't need expensive supplies to make your minis stand out on the battlefield. Follow along as we prove that amazing results don't have to come with a hefty price tag. And on today's episode, we're going to show you guys how to paint up a regiment of dragon ogres for your games of Warhammer the Old World. And by following the tips, techniques, and materials that we suggest through our Cheapskate method, we'll help you save $151.35 at exactly the same time. So that being said, let's go ahead and paint up some dragon ogres. So the first thing you'll need to do, of course, is to assemble your miniatures. You can assemble your miniatures any way that you want to. Now for me, I actually bought these dragon ogres secondhand from my local game store. There was a guy who was trying to offload his Beasts of Chaos Age of Sigmar army. I was able to get the entire armor for around 150 bucks. Not only did I get all the beastmen, but I also got 2 chaos spawn. I got a lot of monsters as well as 6 dragon ogres. And as you can see, these dragon ogres were already assembled already. All 6 had halberds as well. And at the same time, the guy bought them from put them on these really interesting looking Age of Sigmar bases. I'm not sure what these kind of bases are called, but they were textured already and they had like they're always sculpted already, so that part's kind of nice. Except for the dragon owner in the background. That guy actually used my technique where I actually use sand and wood glue to make that base. All you gotta do, of course, is to paint your base with wood glue for the part that has texturing. You dust it with some sand that you get outside, which is absolutely free. Let it dry, and then you make a slurry with a 50-50 mixture of wood glue and water, and you apply it like a wash all over the texturing, so that way when it dries, it creates an airtight seal, so that way nothing flakes off your miniature as well. And once you guys have your miniatures created, the next thing you gotta do, of course, is to decide how you're gonna paint up your miniatures. Now the inspiration I took in order to paint up these dragon ogres are from the old heavy metal style of dragon ogres from the 90s. When I was growing up in the 90s, when I first got into Warhammer, I thought the dragon ogres looked really cool, and these are what the old pewter dragon ogres look like. As you can see, we have flesh tone up top for the dragon ogres, and their hindquarters, which are the dragon part, they're painted in a bright red, and they usually had green scales on the back as well. And this is the inspiration I took to paint up my dragon ogres as well, so that's the color scheme we're going to go with on this particular project. So in order to paint up these miniatures very quickly, I gave some primer to some Rust-Oleum flat red primer. It cost $5.89 at my local Walmart. I just did them the once over the entirety of the miniature. Now the reason why I use red primer is because of all the red that's going to be on these miniatures, especially on the hindquarters. Plus at the same time, the flat red primer also does a really good job with flesh tones as well as any kind of brown colors I want to put on these miniatures. And there's a lot of brown and flesh tone in my Beastman army, so it's a great way to actually get my color going for my miniatures. Now priming actually does a couple things. The first thing it does, it creates a surface for your acrylic paints to adhere to. Unfortunately, if you took acrylic paint and put it directly onto bare plastic, the slightest bit of friction would cause the paint to rub off, ruining the overall finish of your miniature. So that's the reason why we use primer. And the red primer, of course, is going to have a large impact on the vibrancy of the colors that we're using, and that's the reason why I used it. So once we have our primer done, the next thing we gotta do, of course, is to paint the flesh of these miniatures first. And there's actually quite a bit of flesh exposed on these miniatures, and I wanted to use a range of flesh tones on these characters, so I used 3 major paints in order to do this. For the guys on the left-hand side, I use Nutmeg Brown by Apple Barrel Paint. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 58 cents. For the ones in the center, I use Apple Barrel Flesh for 58 cents, and the ones on the right-hand side, I use Burnt Umber, which you can also get at your Walmart for 58 cents. I put 2 thin layers of these paints on all the exposed flesh on these miniatures to get a good solid base coat. And as you can see, the nice thing about that red primer is that it does kind of bleed through a little bit with the craft paint that we're using, giving these guys a very ruddy kind of looking complexion, and adds a lot of warmth to the miniature as well, which is also quite nice. So the next step, of course, is to do some dry brushing. Now, dry brushing is a nice technique that adds the illusion of depth on your miniatures. What it does is that the pigments of the paint actually adhere to the raised surface of your miniature while the darker color stays in the recesses. And as you can see, it brings out a lot of the details we couldn't see before, mainly the musculature on these characters. So for the ones that I did in nutmeg brown, I dry brushed those guys and flesh with apple barrel paint. For the ones I did in flesh, which are in the middle, I dry brushed with the Delta Sarin Coats Peaches and Cream, which you can get your local Hobby Lobby for about $1.65. And for the ones that I did in burnt umber on the right hand side, I picked those guys in their dry brushing with some Territorial Beige, which you can get at Walmart for about 58 cents as well. Just do a quick dry brushing on your miniatures, and my suggestion to you is whenever you do a dry brush, always start off with a very light layer of dry brushing, just because if you don't like the way that it looks, you can always add successive layers of dry brushing to bring up to the value of the color that you're looking for. After all, it's very easy to add dry brushing to your miniatures, but it's very difficult to go back if you make a mistake. And once we're done with the flesh, the next thing we got to work now is on the dragon hindquarters of these dragon ogres. And now, like I said before, my inspiration was from the early 90s heavy metal paint job, so I'm going to paint the hindquarters on my dragon ogres into a bright red. So I'm using Anita's True Red. You can get this at your local Hobby Lobby for about $1.99. It's pretty expensive for a craft paint in my opinion because I'm a cheapskate, but I just love the results that this red color actually does. And when combined with that red primer, it does a beautiful job making this kind of like this kind of blood red color for the hindquarters of the dragon ogres, which of course is exactly what we're looking for as well. And once we're done, the next thing we have to do, of course, is to dry brush the bread that we did earlier. We're going to use Tropic Orange by Apple Barrel Paint. You can get this to local Hobby Walmart for about 58 cents. I just did a quick dry brushing directly on top of the red dragon hindquarters that I did before. And as you can see, it does a beautiful job bringing out those individual scales that we couldn't see before with the texturing all over the miniature. Now, we don't need to be particularly careful at this stage. We can just apply this dry brush as liberally as we want to, and we can neaten up later on when we start putting on the details for these characters. Now the next detail we're going to work on are on the hard scales of these miniatures, and these are going to be primarily on the back of the dragon ogre's torso, as well as the back of the hindquarters, the legs, as well as the tails. Now to add some color variety to this regiment, I decided to split my dragon ogres into two different colors. One of each skin type is located in each and the half of the regiment. I decided to do half these guys in bright blue by Apple Barrel Paint, that cost 58 cents from local Walmart, and the other half in Holly Branch, which is another beautiful green color made by Apple Barrel Paint. That also cost 58 cents as well. And the reason why I did that is because originally I was going to do the whole green and red, but then again, it looked kind of boring just having all 6 guys having exactly the same hard scale color. As you guys know, I'm a really big fanatic when I use different kind of colors in my paint schemes, so I decided to split in half with some blue because it adds some nice contrast. At the same time, the blues and the greens of this unit kind of matches the overall color aesthetic for the rest of the army, so I figured, why not? So once we got those base coats down, the next thing we're going to do, of course, is a dry brush. And we're dry brushing exactly the same color for the blue scales as well as for the green, and that is Dutch Aqua by Folk Art. You can get this at your local Walmart for about $1.17. And the reason why I use this color because it does a beautiful job of bringing out those individual scales that we couldn't see before with the base coating, and at the same time adds a little bit of detail and highlighting on these miniatures as well. So the next detail we'll work on next are on the claws on the dragon hindquarters as well as the spines along their back. And for that color, we're going to pick those out in 2 thin layers of pavement paint by Apple Barrel Paint. You get this at your local Walmart for about 58 cents. And I love using pavement paint because it has this little bit of a grit texture to it, which is a great thing to use for dry brushing. So that way when you dry brush it, it really captures that detail. And speaking of dry brushing, we're going to dry brush the claws and the spines of these characters that we did in pavement earlier with some Folk Art's Pale Gray. You can get this at your local Walmart for about $1.17. As you can see, it brings out those details, adds that additional layer of highlighting on those claws and spines as well. And as weird as it may to say this, we're actually almost done with these miniatures. We actually got quite a bit of it painted because the next thing we're going to do now is on the clothing and the fabric of these miniatures as well. Now luckily for us, there's not very much clothing or fabric on these guys. You pretty much have these sashes that they're wearing along their midsections, as well as some cabling of cloth along the arms and shoulders that they have as well. And once again, I decided to divide this gang into half, this regiment into half. Half of the unit I actually did with green turquoise, which you can get your local Walmart for about 58 cents. And the other half I did Tuscan teal, and which is another beautiful dark teal color that you get your local Walmart for about 50 cents as well. I kind of meant to alternate between the green hard scaled and blue hard scaled ogres on each side, so that way it adds some nice color variety. And the reason why I picked these colors is because these are the kind of color colors that I use for the clothing of the Beastman army that these guys are a part of. And I want to make it look like they're part of the same army by using that turquoise as well as teal color to make them look like they match. So just put 2 thin layers of these colors on the fabric on the miniature and ready to move on for a dry brush. I apologize, not a dry brush, we're going to do war paint instead. That's right. So because of this, what I ended up happening is I actually painted up my Ogres for my Beastman army with these really great green and blue and teal and turquoise war paint designs all over their bodies to make my Ogres stand out. And unfortunately, I did not use that same technique for my Gore or Bestigore regiments. And looking back, I'm kind of sad that I did because I think that would have been a really cool detail to add. But unfortunately, hindsight's 2020. But with these Dragon Ogres though, because they're so large and there's so much flesh exposed on these characters, they would make a perfect canvas to put war paint on. So for the Dragon Ogres that I painted fabric in green turquoise, I decided to add Tuscan teal war paint to their heads, their arms, as well as to their torsos. And for the ones that I did in teal turquoise for their fabrics, I gave them green turquoise for their war paint as well. And as you can see, I make real simple kind of slashes and bands of colors and blocks of colors on their bodies. It doesn't have to be very neat. It could just be very random and weird looking, and just could be solid blocks if you want to, because it looks like it's war paint that's been kind of roughly put onto their bodies and adds to the overall effect. At the same time, it brings out a lot of color and adds a lot of color variety to these miniatures as well by adding this war paint, and they look really awesome at exactly the same time. So with the war paint done, the next thing we're going to do, of course, is we're going to paint the metallic elements on these miniatures, and I use 4 colors in order to do this. I use Folk Arts Copper, Gunmetal Gray. Those are going to cost you $1.17 at your local Walmart for those colors. I use Anita's Acrylic Aged Copper for like a bronzy kind of color, which costs $1.99 at Hobby Lobby, and then Deco Arts Emperor's Gold, which costs 99 cents at my local Walmart. And once again, just going through and just kind of picking out the various details that I want for these characters. I use some of the Gunmetal Gray for some of the armor, the chains, the chainmail, as well as the blades of their weapons. I also use the copper to bring out a lot of details like the little iconography that's hanging off their belts, some of their chainmail pieces, their belly plates, the greaves they have on their forelegs, for example, as well as their forearms. Same thing with Aged Copper. I use that for shoulder plates as well as some chainmail, as well as for some armors and legs greaves too. And same with the duck guard as well. I just kind of randomize the different colors that I use to kind of create some variety in these sculpts. And the reason why I did that is because that way it gives the illusion that there's more individuality for these miniatures than there actually is on these sculpts. And the reason why is because, generally speaking, they're pretty much just the same sculpt, like duplicated twice. So to add that variety and that different look of them, I kind of create these alternating colors with the metallic colors to make them all look kind of individual and like unique from one another. And they look absolutely fantastic when you achieve that effect. So with all the major details over with, we can start working on the finer details, and those finer details are things like the teeth and fangs of the Dragon Ogres, as well as the skulls that are hanging off of their bodies as well. They actually have a lot of hanging skulls from their belts of their bodies, as well as their fangs. So bring out those details. Oh, as far as also the horns that they also have on their heads as well. So to bring out that detail, I use Light Mocha by Appleboro Paint. You can get this at your local Walmart for about 58 cents. I just put 2 thin layers of this Light Mocha and all the bone elements on these characters. And the last major detail we're working on these guys are the cording. So things like cording of the weapons that they have, as well as the bracelets on their wrists, as well as some random pieces of cloth that are holding the skulls onto their armor. To create a little bit of contrasting color, I use Mermaid Blue by Delta Ceramcoat. You can get your local Walmart for a Hobby Lobby for about $1.65 as well. As a nice contrasting color to all the red that these miniatures have, as well as the flesh tones, and it's kind of nice little detail that kind of sticks out and kind of eye-catching as well. And because these miniatures also are standing on some textured bases, I am going to paint the bases already as well before we do the oil wash. I'm going to use Tuscan Teal, put 2 thin layers of this directly all over the sculpted bases that these miniatures are standing on. These miniatures are standing on what looks like kind of like this bas-relief kind of like ruins, I think is what they're supposed to be, like temple ruins or something like that. And I want to use this turquoise color, this teal color, because it contrasts nicely with all the browns, reds, and earth tones in the Beastman army, as well as the browns, reds, and earth tones that these guys also have on as well. So I decided to put 2 thin layers of that, and we're ready to move on to a dry brush. And once again, we're going to dry brush these bases with some Dutch Aqua as before. As you can see, we can bring up a lot of the details we couldn't see before on the bases, like the bob relief sculptures of the floors we're standing on, as well as the sand that I did right there in the character in the center there. Now, I know I'm not using exactly the same texturing for that guy's base, but that's perfectly fine though, because he's going to blend in right in with the rest of the regiment. And one of the last details we're going to do real quick are some of the skulls. On these bases, they have skulls kind of like embedded in the foundation of the floor that they're standing on. So once again, I picked those out of 2 thin layers of light mocha to bring out that detail. So our second to last step, we're going to give an oil wash all of these miniatures as well, and we're going to use mid-wax polyacrylic and mission oak color in order to do this, which costs $7.99. We're using this in lieu of Army Painter Strongtone. Now it does similar things to Army Painter Strongtone, but at a fraction of the cost, because Army Painter Strongtone costs $32 a can, while mid-wax costs $7.99. We're going to apply this stuff like a wash all over the entirety of the miniature as well as the bases that they're standing on. And this oil wash is going to do a couple of things. The first thing it's going to do is going to seep directly into the recesses of the miniature and bring a lot of the details that we couldn't see before, like the individual folds and ripples within their clothing, the texturing on the bases, the folds of their fabric, as well as the cording of their grips, as well as the musculature of these characters as well. The second thing it's also going to do, is, as you can see here, is it blends our transitions between our dry brushing and our base coating. So before we used to have this really chalky pastel appearance, but now that appearance is gone now because the oil wash has kind of smoothed it out. And the last thing it also does too is it darkens down the vibrancy of our colors. That's why we use such bright, bold colors before, because the oil wash is going to stain the colors with a darker color and make it a little bit more subdued. Now you do have to wait for this stuff to dry and cure for about 24 hours because there is polyurethane in this stain, which is going to create a nice outer coating that's going to protect your miniatures from fading as well as from chipping. Now I did forget to take a picture of this step, so I do apologize, but after this stuff dries and cures, we're going to rim the bases in 2 thin layers of territorial beige, because that's exactly the same color we use for the Beastmen army as well, and since these guys are part of that same army, we're going to keep up that same look as well. And then once it's done, this last step is optional. I would recommend using a matte varnish spray to spray on your miniatures to give it a matte finish. Unfortunately, the oil washing will give it a high gloss sheen, so I didn't like that for my miniatures, so I just kind of hit it real quick with the Krylon matte varnish that costs $6.43. It has a more subdued matte finish. You can see a lot of those details we couldn't see before with that high gloss finish. And once again, this is the end result of our miniatures. As you can see, we bring these guys up to a beautiful tabletop standard. They're nice and brightly colored with the different war paint colors that we have, as well as the bases they're standing on. We got that classic red dragon ogre kind of a hindquarter look with the green and blue scales as well. They look absolutely fantastic and ready to bring ruin and chaos on the battlefields of the old world. So that being said, let's go and talk about the materials that you need to purchase from both Army Painter as well as from Citadel if you want to achieve the exact same results we did, but using their name brand paints instead. Alright, so these are the materials you need to buy from both Army Painter as well as Citadel if you want to achieve the exact same results we did, but using those name brand paints instead. You'll need to buy Army Painter Color Primer, which is going to be Fur Brown, which costs you $17.99. You also need to buy Ultramon Gray, Thunderhawk Blue, Baneblade Brown, Teclis Blue, Caliban Green, Luganeth Orange, Bugman's Glow, Cadian Flesh Tone, Baylor Brown, Eshin Gray, Flameone Fresh, and Mephiston Red, and all those colors would cost you $4.55 per pot. You also need to buy Brass Scorpion, Pterodon Turquoise, Wildwood, Talazar Blue, Lead Belcher, Screaming Bell, Aethermatic Blue, and Retributor Armor, and all those colors cost $7.80 for those colors. You also need to buy a can of Army Painter Strongtone for $32, as well as a can of Munitarian Varnish for a matte finish for $24. And assuming that you're purchasing all these colors for the very first time, you're talking about a grand total investment of $190.99 to paint up your miniatures the same way we did, but using the Citadel as well as an Army Painter. Now when you compare that with the cheapskate total of $39.64, we have the grand total savings of $151.35. So in conclusion, if you're looking for a way to save money on the miniatures wargaming hobby, may I suggest using cheap craft paints instead of the name brand materials. You could achieve similar results with a fraction of the price, and even though I may not be the greatest miniature painter in the world, as you can tell, my miniatures look pretty good, and they look really awesome on the tabletop as well. So if you want some tabletop quality but saving a price at the same time, switch to craft paints. It does pretty much the same thing. So that's good for you guys. As always, please like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. I am Commander Cheapskate. I will catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.